My boyfriend is a heartless man. He whispers sweet nothings to me while secretly cheating behind my back. Every day, a new betrayal and never a repeat. During a school competition, he stole my project plan and proudly accepted the award on stage, basking in accolades that should have been mine. The shock of it all was overwhelming, and I ended up in a car accident. Now, Reborn, I vowed to make him pay, starting with his conniving childhood friend, the so-called innocent girl who always provoked me. But then, she kissed me while I was asleep. Wait, this isn't how it was supposed to go. Chapter 1. My boyfriend is a scumbag. He whispers sweet nothings to me while secretly betraying me behind my back. Every day, a new betrayal, never repeating the same one. During a school competition, he stole my project proposal and proudly delivered the award acceptance speech on stage. The shock was too much for me, leaving me dazed and resulting in a car accident. Given a second chance at life, I swore to make the scumbag pay, starting with his provocative childhood friend. But unexpectedly, this so-called innocent girl kissed me while I was asleep. Wait, this isn't how it was supposed to go? Chapter 2. After the car accident, when I opened my eyes again, I found myself seated in a French restaurant, elegantly dressed and maintaining perfect posture. Not overly flashy, but certainly not out of place, just like the image I had always projected to the world. A few scented candles flickered on the table, and a single red rose stood in a slender vase. The candlelight highlighted James's chiseled features, making him look incredibly handsome, enough to catch anyone's eye. As I gazed at the face that once haunted my dreams, I felt nothing but disgust. I had been reborn, and it was once again James's birthday. Chapter 3. Next to James sat a girl. She wore a white dress, her face free of makeup, exuding a pure and innocent vibe. Her doe-like eyes sparkled, evoking a sense of pity. I recalled that in my past life, James had told me, "Cecilia, just having you here on my birthday is enough. I want to spend it with you. To hell with your alone time." The girl's name was Lilian Lee, James's childhood friend. She attended the same school as us but was a year younger. When she first enrolled, her innocent beauty caused quite a stir. She smiled sweetly. "I've heard so much about James's beautiful girlfriend. I simply had to see for myself, so I insisted on coming along. Sorry for intruding on your alone time, Cecilia. You won't be mad at me, will you?" Looking at her delicate face, I remembered the car accident lying on the ground. Across the street, Lilian watched me. Blood flowed into my eyes, blurring my vision. But I imagined her expression was similar to now smiling, sweet yet cruel. James waved his hand dismissively. "Cecilia is always generous. She wouldn't get upset over something like this. But I am upset." Lilian and James were both taken aback. They probably didn't expect the usually gentle and conflict-averse me to say something like that. I looked at Lilian calmly, enunciating each word, then turned to James. "Weren't you planning on having some alone time? Then you two can enjoy it together. I'm leaving." I grabbed my bag and walked out of the restaurant. Chapter 4. Since childhood, my mother had always told me, "Cecilia, you are our daughter. Your every word and action represent not just yourself, but also your father and me, representing the face of the James family." So, I had always held myself to the highest standards. Controlling my weight, researching how to present my looks in the best light. I never dared to slack off in my studies. All just to ensure that whenever people mentioned my name, it would be associated with excellence. Even unreasonable requests from my student council colleagues, I tried my best to accommodate. I thought this version of myself was perfect. Later, I realized that people like me actually have a term that sums it up. It's called a people-pleasing personality. The cool breeze outside felt refreshing. For the first time, I understood that considering my own feelings first, rather than others, felt liberating. It was a refreshing sensation. Footsteps approached from behind. I thought it was James, but when I turned, I saw Lilian's face. Lilian seemed oblivious to the guarded expression on my face, cheerfully linking her arm with mine. "Sister, I'm heading back to school too. We're on the same route, so why not go together?" I coldly asked. What about James? James? When I left, I heard him on the phone with a friend, saying he was going to a karaoke gathering. Right, that's James for you. When problems arise, he always chooses to escape first, then acts clueless while offering a little sweetness afterward. A heartless man with no responsibility. My brow twitched, realizing that my past poor taste was not a pleasant memory. Suddenly, I felt my hair being brushed aside. Lilian playfully twirled a strand of my hair. Sister, you smell so nice. What perfume are you wearing? I froze. I'm not wearing any perfume. As soon as I said that, Lilian leaned in and gently sniffed my neck. Ah, it's not perfume. That must be your natural scent. She looked into my eyes, her gaze narrowing. I really envy James for having you. Chapter 5. In the taxi, Lilian kept glancing at me from the corner of her eye. She always had her little tricks, but I never paid them any mind. In my past life, it was because I had confidence in my relationship with James. Now, I simply saw no need to engage. I shook my head, pitying her for having as poor taste as I once did, subtly distancing myself from her. James kept sending me messages. Cecilia, please don't be mad at Lilian. She's just being childish and didn't mean to interrupt us. Oh, a 19-year-old child. The student council forced me to join a gathering. I couldn't refuse, otherwise, I would have come to find you. Does the student council know you're placing the blame on them? Cecilia, didn't you pay for the restaurant when you made the reservation? I'm a bit short on cash lately. Could you transfer some money to me to cover the bill? It seems this last message was the crux of the matter. Everyone at school said James and I were a perfect match, a couple made in heaven. Both our fathers were well-known entrepreneurs in the city, but unlike me, James was actually the son of his father and a woman outside the marriage. His father relied on his legitimate wife's family resources to build his business, so he didn't dare to defy her, leaving James neglected for years. Even the family assets might not be shared with him in the future. Thus, the high prices at the French restaurant were beyond his means. Reflecting on it, James's initial interest in me was never pure. I had been blinded by love and failed to see through it. I put my phone on silent and didn't reply to any of his messages. Chapter 6. The student council position was quite relaxed. I wrote a report and soon found myself with nothing to do. Daniel pushed the door open and came in. He was in the same department as me and also a good friend of James. He smiled at me, the dark circles under his eyes quite pronounced. No wonder. I heard they had quite the celebration for James's birthday last night. Daniel rubbed his hands together. Cecilia, I have a report here. The president is pushing for it. You know my writing skills are terrible. And I've been busy lately. How could I finish it in such a short time? Daniel looked at me, his eyes filled with expectation. After a brief silence, I tilted my head. So? Daniel was taken aback. This wasn't supposed to be my line. Usually at this point, I would smile considerately and say, "Let me help you. I have some free time. So, Cecilia, can you help me write it?" Daniel smiled again. I decisively refused. No. Daniel was dumbfounded. Why? No reason. I didn't think I needed to explain my refusal. Daniel's expression changed. Fine, don't help then. No need to act so high and mighty. He left, cursing under his breath. Wait. Daniel paused, his eyes brightening. Close the door on your way out. I didn't even look up. Chapter 7. In the afternoon, James was waiting for me outside the dormitory. Cecilia, please don't be upset with me. You didn't reply to my messages last night. I was so worried that I couldn't sleep at all. I looked at him, feigning fatigue while secretly mocking him. But it wasn't the right moment to end things with him. I pretended to be moved. You really didn't sleep a wink? Honestly, I couldn't. How could I sleep when you weren't responding? I even lost interest in singing last night. After a brief internal struggle, I finally said, "All right, since you realize you were wrong, I'll forgive you this time. But don't let it happen again." James's eyes sparkled with joy, and he reached out to take my hand. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I instinctively pulled away. Thinking I was still sulking, James didn't seem to mind and shifted the topic. "Cecilia, you still haven't given me my birthday present." I noticed his wrist was bare. He must have pawned the watch I gave him to cover the dinner bill and was now hoping to get something valuable from me. I smiled faintly. "Of course, I prepared something special." I handed him an elegant gift box. His eyes lit up. "Can I open it?" "Of course." Eagerly, James tore into the box, so hastily that he ended up damaging it. Finally, he revealed a box of paper stars, and his smile faltered. I smiled shyly and asked, "Do you like it?" I folded them all by hand. It took me a whole month. Of course, I didn't fold them myself. I bought them from a boutique for $15. James forced a smile. "I love it. Since you made it yourself, how could I not?" "That's good." I pretended to be shy, burying my head in his shoulder to hide my smirk, and sent a message on my phone. "I have a brand new Jaeger LeCoultre men's watch. Help me sell it." Chapter 8. Lately, my roommates had been giving me strange looks. After some prodding, one finally hesitantly confessed. "Cecilia, I saw your boyfriend with another girl. They looked a bit too close for comfort. That girl seems to be from our school." It was clear that the girl my roommate referred to was Lilian. Lilian had been overtly displaying her feelings for James while making her animosity towards me glaringly obvious. Last week, I was dragged along by James to watch his basketball game. As I casually wiped the seat with his jacket, Lilian approached us. She had a knack for attracting attention. It didn't take long for a boy to come over and flirt with her. With a flick of her hair, she let her fragrance waft over me. "I'm sorry, but I already have someone I like." I stiffened at her words. Lilian seemed to glance at me from the corner of her eye. The boy smiled awkwardly and quickly walked away. Lilian leaned in closer. "Sister, aren't you curious about who I like?" I glanced at James on the court and shrugged. "That's your private matter." But Lilian leaned even closer, whispering conspiratorially in my ear. "I want to tell you, but it's not the right time yet. When the moment is right, I promise I'll tell you first." "All right, just make sure to tell me." I replied with a playful smile. "When the time comes, I'll definitely reveal the true nature of the person you like." Lilian paused, and I couldn't tell if it was just my imagination, but her ears seemed to flush a faint pink. Chapter 9. James rented an apartment off campus. Checking my phone, the day had come, so I headed to his place. "Sweetheart, what brings you here so suddenly? I just finished playing basketball and I'm all sweaty. Let me take a shower first." James kissed my cheek and turned toward the bathroom. I calmly wiped my face with a tissue, pretending not to notice the lipstick stain on his shirt collar. James's phone was charging on the nightstand. In my past life, I trusted him completely and never thought to check his phone. So, he didn't bother to secure it, and his phone had no password. I opened his messaging app, and his chats with his friends were right there. I had seen these messages before. Unfortunately, I was too soft-hearted back then and eventually forgave him after his relentless pleading. That led to the subsequent tragedy. I took screenshots of the chat records and left without looking back. Before I left, I sent James a message while he was still in the shower. "We're breaking up." Chapter 10. 10 minutes later, James's messages started flooding in. "Cecilia, what did I do wrong? Can you please clarify? I'm coming to see you. Let's talk face to face." I picked at my ear. "Don't bother. It's a waste of my time. You know what you did." James kept bombarding me with messages. I ignored them all. Unable to get a response, James finally revealed his true colors. After taking so much from me, you think you can just break up? Return everything you took from me first. I sneered. Sure, but prepare the transfer records and receipts. We'll handle it legally. I sent him photos of the receipts I had already organized. I've got these ready. Calculate the amount and transfer it to me first. James finally fell silent. Chapter 11. Knowing James, I was certain he wouldn't give up easily. So when my roommate rushed over with her phone, I wasn't surprised at all. Cecilia, look at this post. Is it about you? On the campus forum, someone anonymously posted, accusing a certain girl at our school of being not only materialistic but also cheating on her boyfriend, bullying nice guys. Though it didn't name me directly, it was obvious to anyone who knew the situation that it was about me. The post gained a lot of traction with comments piling up in just one day. She usually wears designer brands, and I thought she was a genuine rich girl, but turns out she's just a scammer. Look at her eager demeanor. I can't believe she claims to have no ulterior motives. Only a guy like James, who's been pampered his whole life, would fall for someone like that. Friends asked if I wanted to report the post to the administrators. I waved them off, calm and collected, and began replying to the comments one by one. Isn't it ironic to criticize others while wearing counterfeit brands? Focus on yourself first. Sure, you're so high and mighty, but have you deleted your chat history yet? Don't pretend to be innocent, you little wildcat. These two commenters had the following notes in James's phone, 162. Easy to flirt with, poor. And 168. Delivers herself, wild. The first girl had approached James intentionally, thrilled when he gifted her designer clothes. Little did she know, those were knockoffs costing less than a tenth of the real ones. The second girl, who was in the student council like me, had always been at odds with me. Relying on her looks and figure, she deliberately flirted with James to annoy me, often referring to herself as a little wildcat in their chats. Of course, these labeled girls had no idea. On the other side of the phone, James was sweet-talking them while simultaneously sharing the chat records in his guy group, laughing at their expense. As for the last comment, I directly tagged James. Hey, rich kid, I've sent you the receipts. When will you pay me back? Sure enough, within half an hour, the post was deleted completely. Switching screens, I sent Lilian a message. Come to the student council tomorrow. I need to talk to you. Chapter 12. Unable to reach me, James stormed into the student council the next day. Seeing that the office was empty, he closed the door and confronted me angrily. Cecilia Forrest, did you snoop through my chat records? I spread my hands, replying. If you don't want people to know, don't do it. Seeing I was unmoved, James softened his tone. Cecilia, I was just messing around with those girls. You know how I really feel about you. Could you post something to clarify yesterday's incident? Just say we were arguing, that it was all in good fun. Judging by his expression, James must have lost several backup plans yesterday and was now trying to minimize the damage. I pulled my wrist from his grip, feeling disgusted. James, if you had any shame, you wouldn't say such things. I'm not posting anything, and don't come looking for me again. If you dare to bother me again, I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of your chat records, all your backups included. James wiped his face in frustration and turned to leave. Halfway out, he turned back, grabbing my collar and threatening me. Cecilia, do you want to ruin me? I won't let you. If I can't have a good life, neither will you. I rolled my eyes and started coughing violently. James quickly let go, shocked by my reaction. At that moment, a voice came from the corner. James, what a coincidence. Chapter 13. If James had looked more carefully when he came in, he would have noticed Lilian standing by the bookshelf in the corner. I might have been seeing things, but it seemed the harder I coughed, the darker Lilian's pretty face became. In stark contrast, James's face turned pale as a sheet. I knew James would lose his temper and come looking for me, so I had called Lilian over early, just to let her see the true face of the one she liked. I also knew James had been trying to win Lilian over. If my family's business covered half of City A, then Lilian's family's industry spanned the entire city. Her father could bankrupt countless small and medium-sized enterprises with a flick of his finger. If James could get close to Lilian, he could turn his fortunes around in his family. From James's chat records, I saw that Lilian's attitude had changed over the past 6 months, giving James hope. And my job was to push him back into the darkness. James stammered. "Lilian, let me explain. What I just said was all Cecilia's doing. She tricked me into saying it to you. Don't believe her." James's voice trailed off, because Lilian reached out and gently patted my back. I looked at her, surprised. But determined to piss James off, I leaned weakly into Lilian's arms. James's mouth fell open, looking like he'd been struck by lightning. "Lilian, aren't you leaving?" "James!" Lilian smiled sweetly at him. "Someone will be here soon. If you don't leave, they'll know about your cheating and hitting." Lilian's voice was sweet and pleasant, but full of threats. No wonder boys can't tell a green tea girl. This isn't a green tea girl, this is my sweet little darling. Chapter 14. In the afternoon, I suggested to Professor Brown that the school's security measures needed improvement. I once read a quote. "There are 2 things in the world you can't look at directly, the sun and the human heart." I lay back in my office chair, resting my eyes. Where would James's heart lead him? I was curious. The door opened and someone walked in. "Cecilia," it was Lilian. She hadn't left yet. I didn't plan to respond, so I pretended to sleep. But Lilian came closer and closer until a strand of her hair tickled my nose. "Cecilia?" Her voice was soft and gentle. After a while, not hearing any movement, I thought she had left. Suddenly, warm breath brushed against my face. Soft lips touched mine. My mind went blank, and Lilian's words echoed in my ears. "Cecilia, sorry for intruding on your alone time. You won't be mad at me, will you? Cecilia, you smell so nice. Cecilia, aren't you curious who I like? Cecilia. Cecilia. Cecilia." James is really lucky. It felt like my brain had been trampled by 100 alpacas. So, Lilian's crush had always been me. Chapter 15. James and I had completely fallen out. I watched as rumors about me spread throughout the school. Walking down the hallways, people often gave me curious looks. "Ah, it's her." Whenever this happened, I would smooth my carefully styled hair. "If you have something to say, you can say it to my face." The old me would have been upset and avoided confrontation. But now I understood one thing. Don't waste your energy on people who aren't worth it. I continued to do my work diligently. At 10 o'clock at night, I left the library with my laptop and ran into a classmate. "Hey, Cecilia, you're leaving the library so late? You must be well prepared for the competition." I didn't bother with false modesty. "Yes, I'm quite prepared." I smiled faintly, my gaze drifting past my classmate's shoulder to James in the distance. There weren't many people in the hall, so he must have heard me clearly. James's face was expressionless, but his knuckles were white from gripping his book. Under the streetlights, a chubby orange cat was munching on cat food. A girl in a white dress watched it with gentle eyes. She turned her head, lightly flicking her hair, revealing her perfect profile and neck. I smirked. As a fellow girl, I knew exactly how deliberate that move was. I walked past without looking, and Lilian finally spoke. "Oh, Cecilia, what a coincidence." It was quite a coincidence, considering this was the 10th time I'd run into her outside the library. I glanced at the nearly empty bag of cat food in her hand. Thanks to Lilian, this orange cat could probably survive in the wild for half a month without eating or drinking, just on its fat reserves. Lilian naturally took my hand. I thought of the kiss in the office and couldn't help but shiver. Lilian seemed not to notice and pulled out a wheel cake. Cecilia, you must be hungry after studying so late. My lips moved, about to refuse. But the wheel cake was already at my mouth. It was warm, but not too hot. And it was my favorite taro flavor. The aroma wafted into my nose, and after a moment, I took a big bite. Chapter 16. The competition didn't go as planned. Just before going on stage, my project plan disappeared. My friends frowned, worried for me. I calmly adjusted my hair in the mirror. Under James's smug gaze, I confidently stepped onto the stage. Despite some last-minute adjustments, the presentation didn't go as well as it could have. After the competition, I watched James stand on stage, holding the trophy, giving his acceptance speech with pride. The audience applauded. Winning this competition secured James's spot for graduate school. His future seemed bright. In the preparation room, everyone was in a frenzy. How could the project plan just disappear? Someone must have stolen it. This competition is so important to Cecilia. The thief must be heartless. Without cameras, with so many people coming and going, how can we find the thief? James, dressed in a suit, entered the room. He held the shiny trophy, standing next to a beautifully dressed girl. She seemed to be a campus beauty, looking at him with admiration. A perfect picture of success. He smiled at me, raising an eyebrow. I didn't avoid his gaze, smiling back calmly, which seemed to confuse him. James, this was your choice. If you hadn't taken this step, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I heard from Professor Brown that a new camera was installed in the rest area. They just haven't announced it yet. Everyone was stunned, including me. I looked past the crowd to the owner of the sweet voice. Lilian was also looking at me, smiling faintly. Chapter 17. I had indeed asked Professor Brown to install a camera before the competition. But I also told him to keep it quiet. So how did Lilian know? Lilian scanned the room, her gaze lingering on James. I'll go find Professor Brown and get the footage. Then we'll know who the thief is. As soon as she left the room, James quietly followed. I saw Lilian turn into an empty room, and James quickly followed her in. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. Dark clouds gathered outside. The room was well insulated, I couldn't hear what they were saying. After all, Lilian and James had grown up together and had a bond. If Lilian decided to cover for him, I bit my lip. Fortunately, the door soon opened. Lilian came out first. Behind her, James hung his head, looking dejected. Lilian tossed me a recording pen. I was stunned. Shouldn't it be the surveillance footage? Lilian seemed to read my mind. I tricked him. Didn't expect him to confess everything so easily. Lilian smiled, like a cunning little fox. James, realizing he had been duped, stormed out of the room, furious. He's so scary. Lilian quickly hid behind me, burying her head in my shoulder. Cecilia, I'm so scared. James's face turned red with anger. You too. I glanced at the approaching police officers. You should think about how to explain to the police first. Chapter 18. The rain was cold as I left the police station, wrapping my coat tighter around me. James's father didn't come, and his nominal mother certainly wouldn't. The person who came was the nanny who had watched him grow up. As she passed me, her eyes were full of disdain. Cecilia, I really misjudged you. I stepped aside. Auntie, remember to make James some sweet and sour fish when you get home. I remember he loves it when he's upset. But James, who always claimed to be upset after our fights, had never eaten sweet and sour fish. This time, he probably really wanted it, because this time, he wasn't pretending. Professor Brown messaged me, saying James's first place award was revoked. His graduate school spot was also cancelled. I stared at my phone for a moment, then put it in my pocket. Turning to Lilian, who was trying to share my umbrella, I said, "Stop. Use your own umbrella." Lilian pouted, her voice almost a whisper. But I didn't wear a coat. It's so cold. Chapter 19. Lilian had completely dropped her act now, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. You knew it was cold today. You should have dressed warmer. Cecilia, are you worried about me? Lilian moved closer, her eyes sparkling. But I look good like this. Don't you think so? I couldn't help but glance at her. White really suited her. Realizing I was getting drawn into her words, I stepped back. Just then, a car turned the corner. No horn, no warning. Cecilia! Before I could react, Lilian pulled me aside. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I had seen Lilian smile, get angry, and pretend to be sad. But I had never seen this expression on her face. Anxious, worried, as if she had lost her most precious treasure. In the chaos, our umbrella fell to the ground. Rain blurred my vision, and Lilian's face became fuzzy. It reminded me of my past life, lying on the ground after the car accident. But back then, it was blood that blurred my eyes. At that time, Lilian had the same expression. Lilian hugged me tightly. Cecilia, you scared me. She held me so tight I could barely breathe. I'm sorry. I had always misunderstood you. Chapter 20. A year later, I had gained some fame in the art world. After graduation, I started preparing for my first art exhibition. When I finished my work, I saw Lilian sitting in a red Ferrari smiling at me. Cecilia, there's a new French restaurant that's really good. Your exhibition is tomorrow. Let's celebrate early. French restaurant. I raised an eyebrow meaningfully. Lilian grinned mischievously. Don't worry, this time it's definitely just the two of us. Who said anything about just the two of us? Cecilia. I shivered at the sound of her voice. When we arrived at the French restaurant, we ran into an unexpected guest. James, dressed in a suit, was sweet-talking the woman across from him, making her laugh. I thought I might develop a phobia of French restaurants. Do you want to go somewhere else? Lilian asked. I shook my head. Since we were here, we might as well stay. A mutual friend had told me that James's punishment for stealing the project plan was severe, because his stepmother had secretly pushed for it. So after years of hard work in college, James didn't even get a bachelor's degree. But it seemed James hadn't given up on his dream of finding a wealthy partner to climb the social ladder. The crocodile handbag next to the woman shimmered with a glossy sheen. I sneered and looked away. Chapter 21. On my way to the restroom, I ran into James again. He was standing outside the men's room, smoking a cigarette, talking on the phone. Sweetheart, I'm really meeting a client. I'm not lying. Be good. He stopped mid-sentence. Because he saw me. His expression looked like he had swallowed a fly. Probably afraid of being exposed. When I returned to my seat, James's table was empty. Lilian covered her mouth, laughing. Guess what James's new girlfriend said on the phone while you were gone? Oh. She said, honey, I'm out shopping with my friends. Lilian laughed silently but exuberantly. I thought of James on the phone in the restroom. It seemed James had met his match this time. But whatever happened to him in the future, it had nothing to do with me. Lilian's birthday was approaching. She kept pestering me for a birthday gift. I handed her a ticket to my art exhibition. Lilian's smile froze. Chapter 22. But the next day, Lilian still showed up, dressed to the nines. Like a peacock displaying its feathers. The exhibition was crowded. One piece was particularly popular, the centerpiece of my show. A crowd gathered around it. What is it? Lilian asked me. I gestured for her to see for herself. So, Lilian walked closer and saw the painting. A girl stood in the morning light, her profile clean and serene. Sunlight streamed through the window. Lilian's profile overlapped with the painting. The title of the painting was, Angel. Do you like it? What? Lilian was still in a daze. Your birthday gift. Lilian turned sharply to look at me. Because I had taken her hand. Our fingers intertwined. Under the curious gazes of the onlookers, Lilian hugged me. She whispered in my ear. "Cecilia, I love you. I love you too." Epilogue. In her sophomore year of high school, Lilian found boys her age incredibly annoying. "Excuse me." Lilian looked expressionlessly at the two boys horsing around in front of her. The boys pretended not to hear. But their sneaky glances at her had already betrayed them. "Excuse me." Lilian raised her voice. The boys still ignored her, but one of them bumped into her. Lilian rolled her eyes and stuck out a leg, causing the boy to fall flat on his face. Finally, the boy who had been secretly crushing on her for so long saw Lilian smile at him. A mocking smile. Sometimes Lilian wondered. She asked her friend what it felt like to have a crush on someone. Her friend, while sweetly replying to her boyfriend's messages, said, "It's like your heart gets hit when you see him. Seeing him makes you happy. When he leaves, you feel sad. Happy one moment, sad the next. Isn't that just like being crazy?" Lilian didn't quite get it. She poked the boy in front of her. He turned halfway, his ears a bit red. "What is it?" His upbeat tone gave away his mood. Lilian pulled out a box of chocolates from her desk and tossed it to him. "Take these chocolates. Stop leaving them here. I'm on a diet. You're sabotaging me." The boy's smile fell. It really was a roller coaster of emotions, Lilian thought. High school was intense, and sometimes Lilian would walk near the art building to relax. During graduation season, the art students held their final high school exhibition. There was one painting Lilian particularly liked, a picture of flying birds. From the painting, Lilian sensed a desire to break free and a longing for freedom. It matched her current mood. School felt like a cage to Lilian. In the bottom right corner was the artist's signature, Cecilia. This Cecilia not only painted well but also had beautiful handwriting. The exhibition ended after a few days, and the paintings were taken down. Lilian felt a bit lost when she returned to the area. She wandered around the building. Through a window, she saw someone inside. A girl wearing an apron, bent over, painting on an easel. She looked very focused. The evening sun shone in, illuminating half the room. The girl stood in the light and shadow, and Lilian could see the fine hairs on her face. Maybe it was the beautiful sunset, but Lilian's heart seemed to stop for a moment. She felt something strange. It was like she had been hit. She stood there for a long time, watching the girl finish her painting and sign her name in the bottom right corner, Cecilia. Cecilia, so this was Cecilia.